Hello, everyone. This is Meet the Masters. Thanks for joining us. This is Tim Watson here. Today, I have the pleasure to be joined by Master Vance Britt. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time out to chat with me.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Awesome. What I wanted to talk to you about today was your journey in the martial arts and all the kind of milestones that came during that time. So if you could just let us know what inspired you to start the martial arts in the first place.
Well, that's a pretty good question. I like it. And basically, it's just like a lot of us. I was inspired with the martial arts era of TV, i.e. Bruce Lee. And I thought it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. But, of course, I was a younger age at that time and everything. So once I decided that I was going to go in the military, part of my bucket list was if I get the opportunity to learn a martial art, I'm going to take advantage of it. Mm. So I was prematurely introduced to it, my first duty station in Florida, where I met this gentleman from New York. And I was just interested in learning some self-defense techniques. I was just concerned about defending myself. And he showed me some basic wrist locks, some basic blocks, punches. There was nothing very official. Mm-hmm. But he saw within me, I guess, some abilities and everything. So he started gradually, slowly introducing me to more basic techniques and preparations. Now, when I say preparations, I'm talking about the primary thing,
right?
Touching. And I had played football the majority of my life and everything up to that point. So I was very, very, very tight. And he helped to loosen me up a little bit, but not knowing to me later on, I would take a big dip into it. So he encouraged me by saying, you know what, you have a capacity to learn this. I never forgot that he told me that. So my first duty overseas assignment was in Thailand. And there was a boxing club on the base. So I said, I'll kind of do a little more in my self-defense preparations and learn how to box. But in Thailand, they have kickboxing, Muay Thai. Mm-hmm. And I would sometimes go to the Muay Thai fights that would sometimes be off base. And I saw the combinations of using your hands and your feet. And at the same time, on the base, there was a Taekwondo school. But I didn't know at that time that martial arts was international. And I said, Thailand, Taekwondo, that must not be the real deal. So I didn't enroll. When I left Thailand, I was sent then to Dover, Delaware. And there was a guy there who was teaching Taekwondo. No, I'm talking about Taekwondo, but Tang Soo Do. And I told him about my background in boxing and so on and so forth and everything. So I started taking classes and, to a level of green belt. Went to my first tournament, and I was disqualified because I punched the guy in the face, thinking that he was going to use some kung fu techniques on me because he was in an all-black uniform and he started doing these movements and everything that I seen on TV. I'm like, oh, no, you don't. Wow. and I got disqualified. While we were on base working out one day, a guy came over from another system, Taekwondo system, and showed us some techniques and everything. And I started seeing similarities, still unaware that this thing was universal. Mm-hmm. And from there, I wanted to go back overseas, so I ended up going to Korea. And I said, this is it. No ifs, and buts about it. I was in Korea 3 days, and I was in the karate class. And the class that I decided to take was Tang Soo Do.
Okay.
I told him about my background and everything. I told him I was, previously in a Tang Soo Do class. And he said, what style of Tong Soo Do? I said, I don't know, because the guy never told us about styles. He only said just Taekwondo or Tong Soo Do. You know, he didn't really make it that clear.
Right.
So he said, let me show you something. And he got on the floor, and he did, at that time it was called Kicho Hung Ilbu.
Right.
Not Sege, but Kicho Hung, the Mudokwan system. And I had never, ever seen anyone move with power, grace, and ability like that. I said, I'm in. And I continued, and I worked hard. But it was a struggle, because I was not in real good condition for martial arts. Primarily bare feet. I never walked barefoot. No, that's not for me. And I would come home like the bottom of my toes would be split a little bit. My ankles were hurt. My knees were hurt. And I got into this little routine that when I would leave the Tong Soo Do class, they had a massage parlor on base. Straight up to the massage parlor I would go. Put me in this little cubicle thing, steam me down, and then I would get a massage. And I had to do that because I had to survive. My body was torn up.
Right.
But within a period of a month and a half, my body started coming around. My feet started getting a little more stronger and everything, and acquired the level of green belt. But I got to tell you this, it was funny because I was noticing the pecking order of people in class and how the black belt, of course, we know high rank and everything.
Right.
And everybody was paying homage to them. You know, I'm like, let's forget that. They're human just like I am. They're a man just like I am. Not understanding the rank structure. So I would talk trash to the black belts all the time. You wait till I become a green belt. You wait till I become a red. I'm gonna beat you know what. You know. And they would look at me like, who is this guy? Everybody like, oh, he just came from the United States. He doesn't know. So somebody needs to teach him a lesson. I said, well, you teach him that lesson. You be the one, and I'm gonna show you what I know. So I was kind of basing it on my background with boxing. I know I could use my hands good, right? So the very first time I was able to do a sparring session, I'm out there, and the black belt was like, I'm going to do something to you that ain't never been done to you before. So he's gearing up. I see it in his eyes, like, oh, no, you don't. And I start moving around like Muhammad Ali, dancing, moving around. So all of a sudden, we hear these three thunderous claps in the background. Pow, pow, pow. Everybody froze. Anjo. I didn't know what Anjo meant at that time, but I saw everybody sitting down, so I guess that nigga sit down. We sit down. Grandmaster comes back out. His name was Kim Tong Moon. And he said, in broken English, in Tong Soo Do, we don't run around like chickens. We fight like men. And the whole time he said it, he never looked at me. I know he was talking to me when I was bubbling like nobody's business. So that was that one session. Okay. We started going through the bases and everything. And after a point in time, I got bored with blocks and punches and kicking techniques for warm. I just wanted to spar. So I would come to class after they do all the preliminaries and go in there just enough to get warmed up and start sparring. And he noticed that. So one night, he sparred with the class and everything earlier, and then in reverse, did the blocks and punches and forearms. I'm like, oh, man, what's up with that? He said, you don't like this? I said, no, I want to know how to fight. He said, you want to know how to fight? I said, I want to know how to fight. He said, okay, you fight me. Oh, boy. Here we go. All right, you're a man like I'm a man. So we get out there and everything, and I'm moving around, and I had pretty nice agility, and I had enough common sense knowing not to rush in on because I seen how he had sparred other people and would set them up. I said, oh, you're not setting me up like that. So I don't know how he positioned me, and he never told me about the position. He just told me how to not get into that position where I got into later. And he hit me with a spinning back kick in my left most muscular part of my hip. My entire left leg went numb. I thought to myself, if he had brought that kick up a couple inches higher, that would have been my lower floating rib, and I would probably have broken ribs right now.
Mm.
If he had moved that kick over, that would have been my spine, and he might have broken my spine. And I said, okay, I think it's time for me to pick another level of understanding of what this thing martial arts is all about.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked him, how do you defend against that? He said, well, you see the person doing the same technique. You come in at an angle, and you move quickly. You move slowly, you get hit. You move quickly, and you go past them, and then they are kicking offline. And I practiced. Now, he didn't know I practiced, because anything that I learned in class, afterwards, I would go and practice by myself and stuff. The next time we sparred, I saw him setting up for it. I said, oh, here it comes. And when he went to throw the technique, I sidestepped it, and he missed me completely. He said, oh, good, very good. I'll never do it again. Oh, boy. So I took those experiences and everything, eventually got my black belt, came back to the States. Now I wanted to say, what do I want to do with this? So I decided that the best way to stay good with it is to teach it. And so before I started teaching, I really worked out long and hard, because I wanted to be a good instructor based on the way I was instructed. And that was pretty much the way that things got started. Mm. And the next thing you know, one thing led to another.
Wow. There's so much to unpack there. What I really want to talk about just a little bit is the fact that back then, where you didn't have the internet, you didn't have, things that let you know what was out there. It was kind of martial arts, like you said. You weren't sure what Taekwondo was, or you saw Muay Thai and you thought that was the thing. Like, it's just to know all the information that we do now, and just to think, not that long ago, a lot of it was kind of a mystery to most of the world.
Right.
It's interesting. So
go ahead.
Yeah, when you decided to teach, where was the first? Were you in New Jersey?
Yeah, at that time I've been stationed to LaGuardia Air Force Base, and before leaving Korea, I was told to meet at that time Master Shin, who was at Trenton, and I researched the papers, and at the time it was the Yellow Pages and everything.
Right.
And found out where the location was and everything, and I went over to meet him. Now, while I was in Korea, I learned a lot more about the etiquette and the culture of Koreans and martial arts and everything. So I was somewhat versed on what to expect and how to conduct myself. So I met him and everything, and went into the office. I bowed, and he asked me to take a seat. And I then went on to explain who my instructor was and my level of my rank and everything, and that I wanted permission to start a school at LaGuardia Air Force Base. And the funny thing about meeting Grandmaster Shin for the very first time like that, he never looked at me. He never made eye contact, so I thought. I was aware that Koreans sometimes use their peripheral vision in such a way that you don't think they're paying you any attention, but they're looking at you directly and checking everything out that you did. So I never took my eye off of him. And so we went on discussing everything, and he listened to what I had to say and everything. So he agreed that I could start a school, and that I would also have to continue my training at the Burlington School in New Jersey, where he initially started, teaching in Burlington in New Jersey.
Right.
under a Korean master that I had become acquainted with when I was in Korea. And so I was taking class in New Jersey and Burlington and teaching class on the base. And that was the start of it. But at that time, we were not the World Tungsten Association. We were still affiliated with the United States Tungsten Federation. And that's how that came about.
Gotcha. What was training like at that location? Were you training 2 hours per class, or basically whatever they said?
Yeah, it was 2 hours, sometimes 2.5 hours, and sometimes you could stay out over a little bit, which I would do from time to time. Mm-hmm. And the training was pretty much traditional in the sense that I had learned in Korea. But I knew this guy in Korea, and he didn't train as thorough, in my opinion, as I had been trained in Korea. And there was a little rival between his school and our school on base. His school was downtown, gotcha. And our school was on the base. And I guess it was a little bit of military pride and everything like that. We figured it out. We felt that our school was stronger and better and everything like that. We didn't go head to heads and nothing like that. But I was aware of him, so things that he was telling the students that didn't know any better, I knew better. No. But I didn't, try to show out or anything. I didn't say, no, you're wrong. That's not the way it's supposed to be done. I didn't do any of that because, again, like I said, I had learned the proper protocols and etiquette in the class and such. But people would see me do techniques and how I would do my forms versus how he was teaching them how to do their forms. And they would come to me and question me. Why do you do that slightly different? And I would only explain to them what I had been explained to me. And it made sense. And it had its places like everything does, Right. Later on, years after, come to find out that was just the way of the martial arts, period.
Right.
Opinions. And so I grew. I got my second-degree black belt with him and everything. And he was starting to see my growth and everything. So he said, you know what, man, it's time for you to move on. And I was like, are you kicking me out of the school? He said, no, I'm not kicking you out of school, but you're growing to a capacity. You need to know more. And that's all he said, just like that. So, okay, I need to know more. So around that time, we were starting to develop the World Tungsten Association. Mm-hmm. So being almost a partial part of that, because he knew Grandmaster Shin, in actuality, Grandmaster Shin had placed him in his old school.
Right.
But when the shift came over, I automatically became a part of that. So in '82, when we had the convention, I was there because of being indirectly a part of it. And that's how I became a charter member easier than some other people that came along I didn't really know or had to kind of get a picture of what's this new martial art association. I already knew because I was right there from the very beginning and everything. So that's how that came about.
Interesting. Well, did the way Grandmaster Shin taught, or Master Shin back then, was his mindset more along the lines of what you originally learned in Korea?
Please. Let me tell you, that's the reason I stayed with the World Tungsten Association so long.
Yeah.
Grandmaster Shin had been taught by Grandmaster Wang Ki.
Right.
And I met Grandmaster Wang Ki when I was a green belt at my first test, and he was at my black belt test when I was in Korea. So the ligature of technique and philosophy with Grandmaster Shin was damn sight on. Mm. And like I said, when I met him in Trenton and told him who my instructor was, he said, yes, I know him. And he said it with such, like, that's no big deal. I was like, what? Because I thought, 50-degree black belt. But later on, I come to find out why he said it like he did, because And after he had taught my instructor, I was like, wait a minute, whoa, back up. Hold on. I'm in a line of instructors and didn't even know it and everything. So yeah, his techniques were sight on. And then in addition to that, his philosophy of what he was going to do with the association, he made no bones about it. He let all of us know, this is where we're going. This is the direction of the association. And he didn't say in any direct way, you need to be a part of this. It was like, if you want to be a part of it, you can. You make the choice. And all of us saw, this is a direction that we wanted. So if you ask any of the, we are, any of the old heads, Master Vaughn, Master Godwin, Master Sharp, Master Khan, any of these guys that were up there in the high echelon, Master Stein, Master DeBarker, Master DeCole, any of us, you ask any of us, all of us will fight on the same way. You know, we want to be a part of this. Where can we help? How can we be a part of it? And that's how things went on and everything. So technique-wise, I would go to class over there and would be occasionally, because another thing that was interesting that I didn't realize that I was following in the right way was I was being periodically assigned other masters once I had made second-degree black belt. So once I went from second to third, I was then introduced to Master Yi, who had a school in Pensacola. From Master Yi, I then was introduced to Master Irwin, who was the assistant instructor in Trenton with Grandmaster Shin. Okay? And then when I was testing for my fourth degree black belt on my master's rank, all of them were on the board. I go, whoa. He knows things about me. He knows things about me. He knows things. But what I didn't know was Grandmaster Shin had asked all of them things about me as well, which I come to find out later was the proper protocol of achievement to master. You had to be sponsored or mentored by other masters to get a full picture of your abilities and skills. And I was like, oh, so this is how that worked. Now, that was the most traditional way. And by me being a part of that, and all the others as well, we understood that. So when the association then was formed, and we eventually got to the point of forming the board of directors and all those things of nature like that, that was our way of the traditional situation of promotions being sort of passed on. And again, that was how we were developed. So his philosophy didn't just come from him. It came from others who he had passed on, and they had sort of seen their approach towards it and passed it on and passed it on. So you got a better understanding of how the tradition should be and should be maintained.
Right. You know, it's interesting. I've had a chance, a lot of those names that you said, Master DeBaca, Master Stein, Master Godwin, Master Sharp, Master Khan, I've talked to all of them, and they all, most of them pretty much knew when they met Grandmaster Shin that, like, oh, this guy's the real deal. And, you know, I want to be part of whatever he's doing. So I you know, I'm not surprised that you had that same reaction, and it was one of the reasons why I like doing these interviews, because we have a now, sadly, a generation of black belts who were not around when Grandmaster Shin was here. I mean, obviously we try to uphold his legacy and his philosophy, but, you know, none of us are him.
Right.
So yeah. You mentioned the charter convention. What was the feeling like going into before it and you know, when it was there? Did you have an idea of what it was going to become or the potential?
Well, you know, I was initially just excited to be around so many martial artists. And I looked at it as a opportunity to train with other people that I've never met before and to understand what our connection was. I had never been to a convention before in a sense like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to what the guidelines and projections are going to be as far as the belts and the logo. Obviously, later years on, when I started teaching and really getting deeper into the philosophies of the logo and everything, it became more clear of what was taking place that day. And how those things were setting the foundation for our association. But me personally, I was just excited to rub elbows with people that I've never seen before, never met before from other places,
Mm-hmm.
find out their backgrounds and such and everything that nature like that. And that's exactly what a lot of that did, because we were able to, in conversation, pretty much everybody was saying the same thing. Who's your instructor? Who taught you? Where did you learn this? Where did you learn that? What did you learn? Da. Will you think about this? And so a lot of friendships were started at their convention and have maintained throughout those years. Some were a little on the odd side, but it takes all to make the thing work.
That's right.
And everything. So another thing that excited me was learning new forms. So there was an opportunity to advance, because at one point in time, certain things, and I knew this because I trained in Korea, certain things were not taught to Americans because, you only, as American, you were only supposed to learn at a certain level, and the other things were too traditional and, no, you can't have that. But here was Grandmaster Shin opening the door and said, no, I'm going to teach my students things that they need to know about the tradition of the art of Tong Soo. So the introduction of the bong form, let me tell you, man, I had never worked with a bong that much. I mean, I had some introduction with the bong, and the bong that we were the drum handles, and that one bong. And we worked with that bong so much that weekend, where you grip the bong with your fist and everything, your hands, the forefinger inside and the thumb, inside of the thumb, was raw. And when I tell you raw, I'm talking about skin peeling off, flesh showing, bleeding, blistering, painful. People had Band-Aids, tape, Vaseline, all kind of things to try to remedy it with the bongs. But guess what? But it was still doing it. Everybody was still hungry to learn them bong forms. And then some of the higher level hungs were shown. And, it was a thing back then, if you could learn a hung in one or two settings, you felt yourself to be elite, which is really not the way it was supposed to be done.
Right.
But then we would learn a piece, and then somebody would say, okay, you learn this part, and I'm going to concentrate on that. When they go to the next part, you learn this part, and you concentrate on that. And then we're going to get together and combine those parts, and then we'll have that part as a piece. And we will learn the hungs like this by, teamwork.
Right.
And everything. Right? And then you would go back and you would stay in contact. What you do? I forgot that part. Well, how do you do this thing? And there was that communication. It was amazing. I mean, years later, we talked about it like, how do we become so close? Well, Grandmaster Shin made that closeness like that with, getting us to understand that's okay to share,
right,
and to talk and relate. That's right. That's exactly right. And that's what that was. So all those things put together like that, and that camaraderie, and just the pureness of building something from the ground up, it was great.
Yeah, it seemed like he was very good at building relationships and building that camaraderie with, and really kind of solidifying a group as brothers and sisters in what we do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I still
I
feel like,
recall one event.
go ahead.
I recall one event he was bringing in some people into the association, and again, this is another example of long life friendship and camaraderie. He was bringing in a gentleman from Texas, a gentleman from Australia. I think it was Australia, but I'm not absolutely sure. Any account, we had dinner together after training. We had dinner, and we were having a Korean meal, and he knew I had background in the Korean way to eat food, kimchi and bulgogi and stuff and things like that. And these guys are like, ooh, but when you see someone eating and enjoying and having a good time, you kind of break your inhibitions down and you go for it, you know. Mm-hmm. And so we were eating the bulgogi and everything, and I remember him telling them, listen, this is the way you eat this kind of food. And he got a leaf of lettuce, put the bulgogi in it, put a little bit of spice, a little bit of rice, made a little package, okay, and shoved it in the side of his jaw. And everybody went, what? And I was like, yeah, that's the way it's done. It's good like that. They were okay. And everybody did it. And we started eating and we're laughing and we're drinking. He broke the ice.
Mm.
He broke the inhibitions. He broke down little things that people go, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that. He had that way of breaking that down like that. And once you felt like you were a part of that, it was great. Mm-hmm. So, you're right. He had that ability. Sure.
That's awesome. Wow. I'm sure you had the opportunity, like you said, to train with lots of people, but one of the guys, like even when I was coming up, who was kind of like a living legend to me was Master Chambliss. Mm-hmm. He just has a aura about him. Can you maybe talk about him a little bit and share some stories about him?
Oh yeah. I'm gonna tell you the best. I trained with a little. When we would always train once the association developed and Grandmaster Shin developed the Region 8 instructors class, we would train once a month and we would all train together like that. Mm-hmm. And that was just training, and he would always outwork all of us all the time. We would be huffing and puffing. He's still over there just doing his thing. But there were so many little things that I learned from him, directly and indirectly, that was so valuable. You know, till this day, I'm so thankful that I was able to have him as a mentor as well. The first one was, once I had made master, I felt I was his equal. Wrong. So I'm going over to the headquarters of Philadelphia, and I meet him. He's going over to say that, and I said his first name, Steve, not Master Chambliss, but like we've been old buddies for a long time. And he said, Master Britt, I'm always Master Chambliss, in a very calm voice like that. Man, you want to talk about a feeling. The way he said it, not excitable, not upset, but to the point. You could hear in between the lines, don't you ever. As long as you live. But Steve in your mouth again towards me. But none of that was said. It was just, Master Britt, you are Master Chambliss. And I bowed about 15,000 times. Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. And I never forgot that, right?
Right.
So the next time, here it goes in a different direction. We had a tournament, and one of the black belts kind of showed a little bit of disrespect to me. And I replied to him in a very threatening way. And he overheard that. He pulled me to the side and said, Master Britt, I heard what the black belt said, and he was wrong. But you got to understand, you have to be a bigger man than him in regards to because you're a master. And not take away his power of growing. And I'm not telling you to go and apologize. I don't think that's really what it's all about. But no, you can find a way to go and talk to him to let him know what you were actually trying to say that will help him. And I thought about about a second. I was like, wow, that is so right. Thank you. And I found the time and went over to the guy and talked to him and explained to him that the way that I come off, I didn't mean to sound like what it sounded like. And that I should have just simply said, there's a better way of approaching a master than the way that you did. And by me going back and saying that to him, he was absolutely right. He was absolutely right. And so from his example of that, again, helped me to hold, in some people's eyes, the esteem of difference, And I've always thanked him for that because he didn't have to do that. He could just let that situation be whatever,
Right.
But again, he didn't do that. So tremendous. I've seen him humiliate in the most acceptable way that a person could be humiliated. A young black belt challenged him to sparring, and everybody went, showtime. But he thought to himself basically the same thing he had told me. I'm going to show this guy that he's not who you think he is, but I don't want to destroy him. He said, listen, we're not going to do any kicks. We'll just do punches to the body. Is that okay with you? He's like, sure. I was like, So they started moving around everything. Every time the guy would move out of position, Master Chavez would connect to his body with either a reverse punch or a hook, in that nature like that. But I mean, short, swift kind of hits, right? And he wouldn't like double up, da, 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 da. It was just singular. You moved wrong, plant. You're out of position, plant. Should have kept your elbow up, plant. And I'm sitting there with my arms crossed watching. When is this guy going to realize that he is getting pulverized? He just wants more punishment. So after a point in time, Master Chavez realized that, this guy was just going to not get the point. He said, okay, that's enough for us right now. And you can see in the guy's eyes, like, thank you. But again, it was like, did it in such a masterful way that there was no repercussions by it. There was no ill feeling by it. It was like, I think I shouldn't have done that kind of thing. And I'm like, you're right, you shouldn't have. Now, I had seen that same thing. I had seen that same example in Korea with my master, when his black belt had returned and felt that he was all that. So he wanted to challenge his master in circuit sparring. I said, oh, I'm not leaving here. I got to see this. And they bowed and everything. And my chief instructor, as we call it at that time, we didn't say master, so we were the chief instructor because he was already the master, bounced him off the walls of the dojo because we had a dojo inside of like a Quonset hut. don't know if you know what that is, but it's like a
Yeah.
semi-round building. He
Right.
bounced him off the walls. Boom, 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 knocked him down, picked him up, beat him up, everything. And at the end, when he bowed, he said, "Thank you, sir." Ooh, it took I was biting my hand. I was pushing cloth down my mouth and people trying to laugh out so loud. Because I recognized, and I know he recognized, that he had stepped way out of bounds. And I said, I will never, never challenge my superior to anything of that nature like that. Never, ever, never, never, never. So again, that tradition, see? And that was a teaching of Grandmaster Shin to one of his other students, to another student, and coming down to me. I was like, okay, I can't forget to know when to do these things correctly and properly. And there have been times when I did those kind of things as well also. But Master Chalmers, yeah, he was a great guy. He is a great guy. And a lot of skills, a lot of levels of learning that he gave me.
Yeah, I think he's the epitome of leading by example, because like you said, he could have trounced that guy and embarrassed him. But I think that it sounds like that he not only did that guy possibly learn a lesson, but anyone watching learned a lesson on how to conduct yourself in a respectful way when someone tries to challenge you. So that's a great story.
Yeah. He gained more in doing it that way than losing. Because if he had knocked the guy out or really trashed him, then they'd all be like, he's a master, he's supposed to. This guy had this ability. And he didn't do anything like that. So he maintained the dignity of being a master. See, being a master, a lot of people, for a while thought some of them still do, maybe, I'm not sure. I think it's just a privilege. It's not a privilege. You have to earn it. The traditional method of becoming a master was an earned thing. Grandmaster used to tell me all the time when I was the master's candidate coordinator, Master Britt, don't ever forget to instruct them on what is a master. That a master is an elite, an outstanding, above, superior. And when I would teach the classes, I would always throw it in there really kind of blunt and not really highlighting. The other things I would kind of highlight and put little asterisks on and everything so everybody was like, ding, I got it. But for that, this is what it is to be a master. Bam, that kind of thing like that. So, yeah, he was great at that.
Since you mentioned it, maybe we can talk about your time being the conductor coordinator for the candidates at Master's Clinic, and maybe how that came about, and some of your experiences doing that for how long was it?
When I saw that question, I was like, ooh.
I know, it's a lot to unpack.
But really what happened was the initial master's camp. It was in 1989. And unfortunately, I was overseas at the time and was unable to attend it.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, they developed the different programs. Regional program director, people who were responsible for finances, all the different offices that came under Grandmaster Shin. He was diversifying his office and his position and his responsibilities. And so the next year, I was able to attend. And I spoke to him. I said, "Sir, last year I wasn't able to throw my head in the race for any of these positions, but I want to make a contribution." He said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I have some skills and abilities in teaching leadership and management, and I can put together a little presentation for the people that are going to be testing to understand what their future responsibilities will be. Not knowing that that's right in his well box, because he'll be able to be in academia and having a background and everything. He was like, well, let me see what you can do. So the experience came from me being a military instructor for leadership and management. They sent me to school for it and everything, and I taught in military academies, where I took that format of the military and downgraded it. Obviously, we didn't have to salute each other in the uniform, but we do because we bow. And so that's the same as a salute. And the uniform is a uniform, so respecting the uniform. So I said, well, I can throw almost everything that I teach on a normal basis into this paramilitary organization and color it towards more what we need. So I put together a format and a lesson plan for myself, and put it on a basis of knowing that after a certain amount of time, the brain turns off, and kept it kind of light and lively and throw some jokes in there and everything that makes like that, because that's my ability, that's my gift of making learning fun and everything, and made the first presentation, and he saw it, and he said, I like that. Do it again. Now, I had known from that point, anytime he had pointed you to something, he always wanted to see not just what the same thing you did before, but a little achievement each time, a little growth each time. So each time I would take a look at the students, the people, and we had already kind of set up that, okay, they have to do it twice, because one time is not enough. I only get maybe a couple of hours, and that's not enough for an entire year. So we need to do it twice, and that came about in the same manner, because they wanted to see their technical abilities as well. So that gave me a perfect opportunity to increase what they did the first year, add it to the second year. Great, no problem. So I did just that. I reviewed what was done first, and then came back to add a few other things. And then one thing that really impressed him was that I prepared a little test of their knowledge of Tong Soo. And I premised it by saying, you're going to become masters. And once you become a master, because he had told me, don't say they're masters. Let them know that they're preparing to be masters. I said, you're going to become masters. And how would you feel if your white belt asked you a question that you can answer? And every time I would say that, you would get those looks. And one guy tried to, talk around it. I said, that's the one thing I don't ever want to do. He said, what's that? I said, you don't ever want to try to con the students. Now, you know me now. I talk straight from the hip. And everybody was like, ooh. I'm like, yeah, what you mean, ooh? Why would you want to con your student? What are you passing on? The con? Are you trying to pass on technology, techniques, knowledge? So now they go back, and you know what happens? And we had this class, and this guy, Master Britt, was talking this and talking. I never heard this stuff like this before, and I really wanted to. And he gave us a test. How you doing the test? I failed. I thought you knew talking about. I thought I did too. But he gave us this test, and he gave us the answers after, and he told us what the answers were in the book. And I looked at the book, and it was in the book, but I'd never seen it in the book. And I told Grandmaster Shin, I said, I'm going to do this because, number one, I'm going to make the test as difficult as I can so he can't pass. He said, why is that? I said, make them read the book. Because if they pass the test, they feel like they already know what's in the book. They're not going to read it anymore. They're going to just go put it off on the side. He said, oh, I like that. I said, but if I find little pieces and bits in the book that people look over, but it's still just as important, like what's the meaning of this, or how old is this, and how do you say this, then those things stick out. And you go back over, you go like, oh, he was right. Oh, he was right. And so all of a sudden you find yourself going deeper and deeper into it. And that's what I did. And it started working. So by the third candidates class, the word had gotten out. Don't mess with Master Britt in that class, because you'll find yourself in a bucket. Right? And the bucket meant I would make you do push-ups. I would do all kind of things. I was screaming. And that was again a part of that military attitude of, you think you know, you don't know. I'm going to break you down, and I'm going to build you back up, and everything like that. So the word had gotten out. So physically, I could see, these guys are ready to go to war. No big deal. But what about that mental aspect? Where's that head at? Mm-hmm. So I remember the class that we were in Alabama, and I was riding on the bus with the candidates. I had the choice of riding on the other bus. I said, no, I'm going to stay with the candidates because I know how students can be. So if I'm there, that's going to kind of put them in check. So they saw me on the bus and said, ooh, here's our opportunity. We can get into his head and find out what's on the test. And let me tell you, they started drilling me like you wouldn't know. Master Britt, according to page 114 in chapter something so-and-so, isn't it that this is supposed to be this? I'm like, oh, yeah, I recall that. Everybody, yeah, we're going to get an answer. I said, yeah, I recall that. And that's why you should study it again to make sure that you really know it. Huh? No answer. And they kept on. What about if you say this word, but you really mean to say that word? Oh, that's not bad, but that wouldn't be correct, would it? No, it wouldn't. So why are you asking me? No answer. Nothing. But they drill and drill and drill. This one student had put together flashcards. Said, take a look at these cards that I need. Don't you think they're cool? I went, you don't know these words already? Person said, yes. I said, okay, good, yeah, they're good. You know them already. Not our approval of saying, yes, we can do this different. I mean, they just went on and on and try to find a weak link in my chain. Stop playing. Don't do it like that. And then the next class after that one, I actually had forgotten that I wanted them to give me their essays in the beginning, of the training, so I could read them and give it back to them and let them know yes, no, indifferent. So they had taken a test. We had got back for the physical test about, 2:00 in the morning. Oh, you guys been passing essays. What essays? I said the essays that you're supposed to pass in, 500 words of your choice of martial arts or something about the martial arts, which was a way of getting them to kind of focus on what their eventual essay was going to be. So I was like, oh, no, you got to pass those in. I want them by in the morning. Now, I took that from a crash course that I had to take in college that I blew it. I went out partying. But guess what? Pushed against the wall, I got it done.
Right.
And I said to them, you're a master. And you're standing in front of that class as an elite individual, the leader. You're going to make excuses about things that you should have taken care of and that's behind you, and you don't have the ability to better than that? If you're in the ring sparring, and this guy has 1 point over you, and there's 30 seconds left, you need to tell me you can't find the eliteness in yourself to get that point that's either tied up or win? then that's the same thing as this. And those cats went back to the dormitories. Knock, knock, knock. Knock, knock, knock. I said, wait a minute, this is kind of in rhythm. They planned it. You made us stay all night. They're going to make you stay. I said, oh my goodness. So the next day when you know our banquet and everything, I walked out and said, okay, that was very good. I mean, you stay up all night, was writing, you kept me up all night reading. Then everybody laughed it off. It was so good. It was so funny. But yeah, that was a couple of kind of things in like that, you know. But there was some great times with the candidates, man. Great times. One other time I had advanced so many times over the years. I did it for almost 25 years. And of course, I had learned other advanced teaching techniques as well, also and everything. So the era of time, we were kind of right in the middle of it as well. So all of a sudden, this is the era of teamwork. Everything was team this, team that, team. But military had been doing team stuff for years and years and years. I had gone to a team leadership thing long before then, you know, and everything. So I incorporated that with the Punctual Candidates program. And it was to show that even though we're masters, or you're going to become a master, you're still a human being. And you have sensitivities. And others have sensitivities and limits. And understanding your limits and your sensitivity is only being human. One of the techniques was you sit in front of your classmates and you have 2 minutes to explain who you were, your likes, dislikes, things that made importance, and so on and so on and so on. And the person listening didn't interrupt. They could only listen for 2 minutes. And a lot of people didn't realize when you just listen for 2 minutes how much you can really learn. And some people didn't know that sometimes 2 minutes is a long time to talk about yourself. And at the end of 2 minutes, you flip it over. But before you flip it over, though, the person who's listening had to reflect back to the person who had just told them about themselves. Then you flip it over, the person that just heard what them about themselves had to listen about the person that told them about themselves, and then they reflected back. And then you will rotate. And when you rotate, you talk about a different topic. What was the best thing you ever did that made you feel like you made an accomplishment? So in a period of 10 minutes, 20 minutes, there's a lot of exchange of information, of sharing, that a lot of times you don't get to really do. And this is a way that I was saying, we're all in this together. And we have things that we can see. A lot of other friendships and developments came out of that. Now, why did that resonate with me? Because that's what Grandmaster Shin had done with a small little group of us initially. And then when he recognized that I had absorbed that and was able to expound it, that's how the position of the coordinator became such an important role in our development of masters and towards the future leadership of our associations. And I think sometimes the things that I did kind of threw them for a loop because it would become so personal and sincere that it touched my heart.
Right.
And here everybody had an understanding of me being a big bad monster, bully bad guy. I'd be crying my eyeballs out, man, because it was so tender. I remember the one master from Mexico was speaking, and he was speaking and trying to speak in broken English. I said, no. You speak your language and let us know what you want to say in your language from your heart. We'll understand it. And he started speaking in Spanish. And for the point of time of him speaking in Spanish, you could hear a rat go to the bathroom on cotton. Everybody was absorbing, not necessarily the words were being said, but the intensity and the sincerity in his voice of how he was saying it. And you understood it. This meant everything to him. This was life to him. And for him to be able to do that and see the people's interest focused on him, again, a binding, tightening way. So here was an international opening as well also. And so, man, there have been times and things that went on in those classes, unbelievable.
Yeah, speaking from personal experience, that I don't know if life-changing or at least like enlightening and a better understanding of where other people come from, because we had those moments where people shared and they left themselves vulnerable to where, you know, they spoke from the heart and let you know what being there meant to them. And it was like you said, it's something that I hold on to, and I thank you for fostering that program and getting it to the point where it is now. I think it's an important and a pivotal part of like you said, being a master, that transformation from being a follower to a leader. Now, some people teach before master, but you understand what I mean by that.
Of course, yes. Obviously, yes.
Yeah, so believe it or not, we're over an hour. I want to I don't want to keep it too long.
Oh no, I got time. Don't worry about it.
Okay. I have a couple more.
Yeah.
A couple more questions for you.
Because I could be long-winded, but you know, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. This is therapeutic.
Awesome. One of the things I wanted to talk about was when I was coming up through the ranks, most years you were teaching the sword at Black Belt Clinic. And I know that you talked about learning the bong at the charter convention. Where did the interest and love for the sword come from?
Again, like I said, when I looked at those questions, I'm like, this guy obviously did his homework. Because those are some of the key things about me that if you know anything about me in the martial arts and Taekwondo, the sword became a very, 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 very important thing for me. And how that came about was, as you well know, we were given the sword form, sort of the cart before the horse kind of thing, and backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there for that. I can't recall the actual year, but Grandmaster Shin was in Alabama, and I had gone down there as well. I hadn't been invited there. I kind of like invited myself indirectly there. I had a way about doing that because, again, in the military. And he said Alabama. I was like, where in Alabama? He said Montgomery. That's where I went to school for becoming a military instructor. I was like, when? He told her, I was like, okay, I'm going to surprise you. And I was there. So he pulled, at that time, and was still with us, Master Hicks, off to the side. We were doing a big seminar out there. He pulled him off to the side because he had assigned Master Hicks with learning the sword form from Kutsuwan, and he wanted to see what it could offer us in Tong Soo. Now, not knowing at that time that the sword was a traditional weapon for Koreans, that Kutsuwan had known that, and that was a part of their training and everything. So he wanted to see how he could adopt what Kutsuwan was doing into our association to have a fuller traditional background for World Tong Soo, not just Tong Soo, but World Tong Soo, maintaining Korean tradition. So Master Hicks had trained, and he looked at the form. It was just the three of us. We were in Master Hicks' backyard, and it was just the three of us. And he said, okay, let's move some parts around. And I was like, move some parts around? You know you could do that. So they started, Master would show him what he was initially showing. He said, well, let's take this part out and put this part in. I think this will be more applicable for us. And he piecemeal and everything like this. And Master Hicks was on point because here he had learned the form one way and had to readopt his mind and ability and skill to do it another way. And that afternoon, what was developed was what we initially had as our first sword form. When I saw that, I was like, and another thing about martial arts, that certain things can be adjusted and adopted to make better or to maintain tradition. Okay, keep that in the back of my mind. So all of us learned the sword form and everything, and all of us had the same complaint. Why in the world would you roll in a sword form? Well, I did anyway.
Right.
So one of my master theses, I believe it was my sixth, become a sixth dan, was the sword. I couldn't think of anything else. I did introduce education in the martial arts. I did something else. So I was kind of running thin on what am I going to talk about now? What will my essay be this time? And it became the sword. So I talked to him and everything. I said, well, one of my intentions is to take apart the sword form, readapt it to sword one-step techniques. Okay, that's a concept, that's an idea. He said, but if you're going to do that, you have to make sure that you have an in-depth foreground on what the sword is all about, where it came from, blah, 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 blah. A good historical introduction of the sword before you go right straight into the techniques. Just the techniques alone, I'm not going to accept that. I want to see you do some research on the sword. Okay, fine. So I started researching the sword. Japanese sword, Chinese sword, Korean sword, comparisons, how the sword was made, what are the materials, what was the intent, what was the techniques, everything. The terminologies. Obviously, Korean terminologies are Korean terminology. One time, when I was working in the Department of Corrections, we had a Korean gentleman who worked in American Korean. And I asked him, how do you say low block with the sword? He said, Hadamaki. I said, what'd you say? He said, Hadamaki. I said, low block? He said, yeah, low block. I said, okay. It didn't dawn on me that you still say low block. If you got a sword in your hand, you say Hadamaki. You're not talking about your arms anymore. You're talking about with the sword. I said, well, is there more specific where he said, when you say Jengam Hadamaki, that would be okay? I said, oh, I can do all of that. Duh. So, terminologies, the codes of conduct, sword and codes of conduct in terms of those, very similar. Like, whoa, look at this, all these different things. So I did all that research and everything like this and became very fond of the sword. Took out certain movements from the sword form, applied them to one step as we do for one step hand techniques. You know, low block, reverse punch. Well, what do we teach the students the first thing to do? Low block, reverse punch. Where's the low block, reverse punch to the one step technique? Well, you select the number that we have, and there it is. Where to come from? From the basics. So the basic strikes combined together could then form the one steps. I did 30 of them. Yeah, mind you, there can be 30 million of them because of combinations of how you can do it. But I just wanted to set some precedence, some stage of saying, this is how it can be done if you choose to look in this direction. That was my intent. So I kind of stayed with the sword and enjoyed it and everything, and went to a seminar by chance where this guy was teaching sword techniques in Japanese. Now, mind you, we had brought a guy in from a friend of Grandmaster Shin now to introduce us to the sword, and we knew more about the sword than he did, because all he taught us was how you draw the sword. And after a couple of times of drawing the sword, you got to be really disciplined and focused, which was the whole concept of drawing the sword, a 1,000 times, so that the one time that you do it perfect.
Right.
So here we are drawing ramp, boom, and place back amplitude, and place back amplitude. Then you start to look around. What mystery can I get into? Then draw bubble. Where's Master Casaron? See if I can get close to give him see if I can get close to give him a haircut. He's a boom. Where's Master Bar? Hey, Master Bar, look up on your knee, boo. And and we're actually like a bunch of kids in there, but we're still taking it in. But with just a little bit of, what is a relief? So when I take this seminar with this guy, he goes doing the same thing again. Okay, this must have some concept. All right, and he's showing us everything. So I said, well, let me kind of take this a step further. I got more research material from DVDs and started looking at the techniques and application. I said, well, those techniques are similar to what we already do. And it's not a question of who came first, the chicken or the egg, but the effectiveness of it and everything. In further researching, I found that in 1945, when the Japanese occupied Korea, they outlawed weapons in Korea because obviously if you're going to occupy a country, you don't want to have a weapon that could go against you. But they tried to introduce their culture on the Koreans. Koreans always had a culture.
Right.
That's how we developed things like if a Japanese swordsman or samurai is trying to cut your head off, you kneel and you do a diagonal cut at a 45-degree angle, risking your head cut off, but you incapacitate your opponent who's trying to kill you.
Right.
All right, so I'm looking at all these things. I'm going, right, okay. So I started looking at different techniques and kind of compiling together techniques that I thought would be, number one, interesting enough so that you wouldn't get into the mode of the way of thinking that we were thinking that the man was splitting. Who can I hit upside the head with a sword? Because I'm going to use not a live blade, but I'm using a blade that could be some accidents, because I wanted to feel the realism of it. So I researched and practiced and got everything diagrammed and introduced it at the light bill clinic, and it was a success, And then the word caught on, and people want to be over there more and more and more and more and more. And because of the fun learning, it was controlled. It wasn't the students developing the fun. The fun was already incorporated in the technique. And that way, if you're doing the technique, you have fun. You don't have time to make up something that's already made up for you. And you learn it at the same time. Bingo. Two birds with one stone. safety and learning and control. Well, maybe there's three birds. And that's how that came about in that manner like that. And so I tried to take it a step further, but I wasn't the first to go with the cutting. Master White introduced cutting at the Black Belt camps first. And it was a little limited and everything. And it didn't look quite as controlled and everything. And I thought, this can be done a little bit better with a little different approach. And so I took it, a little step further and tried to make it interesting again by using bamboo, because the actual mats that you cut, you have to be trained over a period of time to cut them correctly. So, bamboo is like a little thin stick, and you still see the results. And you felt a level of accomplishment, unless the blade was dulled or you didn't have the bamboo secured correctly. A couple of times, both cases came out, and people were baseball batting the bamboo. They fly up, they're like, whoop, you hit it wrong. So let's try another way, But it still became a success, and it became safe. And that was Grandmaster Shin's overall awareness and what he wanted: safe, interesting, and learning. And so that's how my sword thing, my interest in the sword came to be. And I made sure that I wasn't stepping on anybody's toes and saying, you don't do it like this, and you don't do it like that. It's not like this, not like that. This is another way. This is something that you maybe didn't think of, and then you can incorporate it. So that's what I did with that.
Huh. How many, you came up with your own set of one steps?
Yes.
So how many are there in the set? And is there a place where do you have a handout or somewhere that we could possibly see them?
That's at the headquarters, supposedly, with my my submission of my essays.
Okay.
And it's 30. Now, over the years, some years back, I saw that someone else had not attempted, but did the same thing. And some of the techniques were similar. So, of course, you're going to have similarities anyway.
Sure.
But the thing with it was, my material was over 20 years old, so it was okay, But what I basically did was just took the first 10, I think, were the first 10 movements of the sword form, and my mind thought was reinforce the movements of the form. So you're practicing the form and showing a direct or indirect or possible reason why these things are in the form. And then some combinations of those things, as in sparring, as in one-step sparring, and some advanced things, which, what is an advancement? More combinations. And I came up with 30 of them.
I find a lot of times when you put applications to a form, not just a sword form, but you're just working basic open hand forms, and you can give a student an application, I think it solidifies it in their head just that much more. So I especially with that, because it's that the first, when it's not the first sword form anymore, but Jangam it's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
Even in the beginning. So I appreciate that, and I will have to look into getting that information for myself and for my students.
Hey, I remember you're right about the information like that, but you got to be careful with interpretation versus application, sort of speaking in that manner like that. When I was trained in Korea, and the instructor obviously had a limitation because of language barriers, he couldn't all the time explain certain things in the movements that made to an American any sense. For Koreans, it was simply a point of discipline. This is what I'm showing you. This is what you do, and basically no questions asked.
Right.
Later on, obviously, once you become a master, you shouldn't necessarily challenge it, but you kind of, because you always wonder what the hell was that about. And we would sometimes among our own little peer groups go like, why did we do a forward roll in a sword forward? If I got a sword in my hand, I'm not rolling on the ground. If he's trying to cut at me, I'm not, those kind of things like that. So interpretations sometimes start to be developed. Well, I interpret it as this, and this. And I've seen over the years where comparative interpretations of other systems, of techniques, to supposedly clear the understanding of information is an indirect way of sometimes belittling another system or art to say, well, this is why we do it because we're better, so on and so forth. And that should never be the intent.
Right.
And so, Shotokan, for instance, it kind of shocked me when I found out that a lot of what we do in Tang Soo Do is done in Shotokan. And okay, no problem. That's not to say that Shotokan is better or Tang Soo Do is better. It's just to say that applications and intent and interpretations are all there differently.
Right.
A move in Basai that is done to show a throw. You didn't see a throw when you did the move because there was nobody behind you and nobody in front of you and nobody in the vicinity to interpretate the throw. But then when you put a person in a certain position and a throw was accomplished, you go, oh, that's why it's there. But then you learn on later in a real combative situation, that wouldn't necessarily apply. So there goes the application versus interpretation.
Right.
And so as a master instructor, you have to be aware of that and be able to communicate that so it's not misinformed or misinterpreted. And that's where that eliteness comes in again. If you don't know, haven't researched, don't care to research, but you want to filter down this information wrongly, indifferently, or opinionatedly, that's going to cause a problem. It's going to make the student go, what if? And I learned in Korea, you don't ever ask what if. It wasn't by me. But I was like, I'm never going to ask what if because I'll see what the answer is. And I had a couple of people ask me what if, and I showed them, and after a while, my students was like, don't say what if in front of him. Don't say what if.
Yeah.
Yeah, what if. Don't say that in front of him because he's going to show you the technique. And I would say, if you ask me, what about this or what if, I'm going to show you. You may not like the results. Well, you get some knuckleheads, obviously, And I had a second, I was a third degree black belt at the time, and he was a second degree black belt, and he should have known better. But he was trying to show me in front of the students, and I recognized that. But I hadn't been mentored by Master Chadman at that time. So he grabbed me from behind and turned his body sideways, to show, okay, I said, somebody grab you from behind, move your hips to the left or to the right, straight back with a ridge hand or a knife hand, and you'll connect the groin. And he over there, he's analyzing it, and he said, what about? I said, oh boy, no, he didn't. I said, what about what? He said, what about if somebody grab you and do something different? I said, come in, show what you're talking about. I baited him, obviously. He came up, and I felt his body turn. I was like, okay, he's turning, so his opening is to my left. He said, what if somebody grab you like this? I said, well, you simply do this. And then left hand goes straight where his groin was. Bam! Ooh! Does that answer your question? Everybody went, as we progress up and everything and things like that. But yeah, interpretation of the homies and everything are very important, and it helps to clarify a lot of things.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great way to look at it. I want to start to wrap up here. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we finish? Any other lessons? You've shared lots of lessons, and I appreciate you doing that. Is there anything else you would like to talk about before we finish up?
I thought about that. I was hoping that I would be able to do this constructively enough that it doesn't seem too confusing. So I'm gonna give it a little go. Tradition. I sort of noticed that once Grandmaster Shin passed away, that I didn't hear the word used as much. That's not to say that it's still not being used correctly or people not still practicing it. But any opportunity that an instructor, be it a chief, master instructor, whomever, gets to implement tradition of our art, of the martial arts, and it doesn't have to be Tong Soo Do or Welcome to the of the art, the reason why we do it, always be done. It helps to develop a very strong foundation for the student, which to build on. Where did it all come from? It didn't just come from me. It came from way back when. Do we have a right or a responsibility to change tradition? Now, people get changed and adapting sometimes interwoven together. You can adapt to things. Marines says adapt, diversify, overcome. They got a little creed that they use. That's military. Okay, fine, I understand that. But tradition is the holding on of a way, of a culture that solidifies that culture, keeps that culture solid. We are a culture. Grandmaster Shin provided us with that culture. We speak a certain way. We dress a certain way. We act a certain way. You put those things together, that's a culture. So in our Tong Soo Do culture, in our world Tong Soo Do culture, we have to maintain the founder's beliefs, his tradition of what he wanted with this organization, even though he's no longer here. And he gave it to enough of us long ago that we've been able to send it out. My student, Master Johnny Williamson, I'm so very proud of him because I watched him from white belt, 6th-degree black belt master. I've watched his school with a little small locker to a beaming, wonderful, dynamic dojang with numbers that are just overwhelming. I've watched his growth and knowledge for business and management and communications and wisdom soar. Oh, so proud of him. And he says, oh, that's because of what he watched with me. But I couldn't see it at the time that I was doing it. But I was trying to teach him the culture and the tradition. So I understand how it is today. This is 2021, and how commercialism is important. Don't get me wrong. I had a school. I know that's all about, and I'm not knocking it. But we can't let that override in our association the overall gift that Grandmaster Shin gave us. We've seen what other organizations have done and what happens to them when they didn't maintain it as well. And I can honestly say our association has survived all that garbage. We have diversified. We have adopted. Overt showed us that we can still maintain a worldwide organization by manners of the technology of today. I am so proud of you guys holding on and maintaining, because this old head would have had a problem. Zoom class. I am too hands-on.
Yeah.
But you guys have found a way to maintain it and maintain the numbers and maintain the interest. And indirectly, I know the tradition is in there. And I know there are people that are doing it. They might not do it as well as we did it or the way that we did it because we old heads, you don't understand? Roundhouse to the head. Okay, you understand that? But that foundation is so important to develop in a school and the student throughout that we cannot throw that away. We got to hold on to that. I know we're doing a good job. I'm watching. I'm still kind of active, even though I'm retired from physically training and teaching and everything. But I keep tabs on who's doing what and how things are going. And I'm pleased with it. Because I'm still a part of it. When you say you're a lifetime member, you're a lifetime member. And I'm a lifetime member of the World Taekwondo Association. Proud of that. I've made my contributions. I've done things, and I'm so proud of. The least proud that I've been the only recipient of the Master of Disaster Award 2 times consecutive in 1 year. Nobody can beat that record. I'm the only person that did it. And the second was given to me by the Grandmaster. And I said, after that, nobody can beat this record. I want to keep it for me. So that's tradition. And so, if anything, I hope we hold on to that. That's important.
I think that's a great sentiment, and something that everyone can learn from. Like you said, it's out there. Could it be a little better? Some, yes, for sure. And that's up to us as instructors to look further into our training philosophy, right? Like you went for many years, crack that book open and take a deep dive and ask yourself the tough questions. Like, am I passing on what Grandmaster Shin wants me to do? And am I making him proud? Am I making my instructors proud? So I appreciate that sentiment. Sir, I want to thank you for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I'm honored, and I'm happy I got a chance to chat with you today.
Well, I'm so very honored as well. Like I said, I've been watching what you've been doing. I've been listening to it and everything, and I said, this guy has got a nice approach. I like this because, see, this is something that years later people can look back on and go, oh, I didn't know that was taking place. I didn't know this person knew that. I didn't know. And that's what we need.
Right.
We need. Books are great, and we can't get around that. But the new generation, I think it's I don't know if it's the G generation or X generation, one of them. They were about audio and visual in a little small package. And we got to become accustomed to that. And this is what you've already put your hands on. Just like I was an innovator in the preparation of masters, you've become an innovator in the approach of information. And that's important. So kudos to you also.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the kind words. Well, again, thank you, sir. And I think that's a good wrap up. And I will look forward to talking to you again soon, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. You have a beautiful day.
All right. You too. Tong Su.
Tong Su.